Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm installing an aftermarket fuel gauge into the Scout. So this is just a super cheap and simple fuel gauge that I found at AutoZone. It was like 10 bucks. Nothing super fancy, but it'll work perfectly for the Scout. So the way this gauge works, this is just a light bulb that goes in the back, but all this has on the back are 3 pins. Now you've got ground, switched power, and then the signal wire in from the fuel sending unit on the fuel cell. So all you need to get this to work is you need the signal wire coming from the fuel cell, which in this case is this yellow wire here. The other one is the ground. Got your yellow wire here, that's the signal wire that goes to the fuel gauge itself. And that'll go onto this bottom pin here, so I need to make that go to that. And then it just needs a power and a ground, which I'll do up front where the gauge is going to go. So after I finish installing this fuel gauge, then the fuel cell and the whole fuel system for the Scout will be completed, and I can finally check it off the list and move on. So now up underneath the Scout, I have to cut out the extension wires here that I added to the factory wiring for the original fuel gauge, and I couldn't get that to work, so now I'm going a different way, but I need to cut this wiring out because I can reuse it for the new gauge. So before I start running any wires, I first need to mount the gauge on the dash so I know where to run the wires to. Now I'm thinking about putting it right here, up underneath the dash, just in front of the factory fuel gauge. So I think this position, right here, I think right there is going to work really well. So now that this gauge is mounted, let's run some of the wires. So this blue wire running along the door sill, this is the power wire for the fuel pump. Now I'm going to be running the signal wires from the fuel sending unit just alongside this. I will later cable manage this and route it much nicer, but for now this will work. So now I've got the ground and the signal wire from the sending unit in the fuel cell all the way ran up to the gauge here. So now all I gotta do is run power and a ground for the gauge itself, and I'm just gonna tap into the switch panel here because I know I already have a bunch of power and ground right in the back of it. So now I have the ground and power wire for the gauge itself all hooked up to the back of the switch panel and ready to go. So now I've got all the wiring I need ran up to the bottom of the gauge. Now I've got to wire this all into the back of the gauge and we'll be done. Alright, the gauge is all the way installed, just one final touch. Alright, the gauge is fully installed, set up, and ready to go, and it works perfectly. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.